The horizon of Obsidian Prime stretched before Cadet Eli Carter, like a jagged, crystalline promise of both danger and discovery. The violet tinge of the sky cast an otherworldly glow on the vast obsidian fields that gave the planet its name. Black, volcanic glass formations that reached toward the heavens in defiance of gravity. As Eli stood at the edge of the testing grounds, the weight of the Interplanetary Survey Academy's survival trial pressed upon his shoulders as heavily as the alien atmosphere. Unlike his fellow cadets who bustled around with gleaming machinery and state-of-the-art terraforming equipment, Eli's hands were occupied with something far simpler, a weathered, rust-flecked knife that had belonged to his great-grandfather. The blade had cut through Earth's wilderness for generations before finding its way into the hands of the first Carter to venture beyond the stars. "Cadets, assemble!" The crystalline voice of Professor Zareth cut through the pre-trial chatter. The professor's body, composed of semi-transparent mineral structures that caught and refracted the light of Obsidian Prime's distant sun, moved with geometric precision toward the gathered students. The alien professor's faceted eyes swept over the assembly, pausing noticeably when they landed on Eli and the ancestral blade he was carefully securing to his utility belt. "What primitive curiosity is that? Cadet Carter." Professor Zareth's voice resonated with the peculiar harmonic quality of his crystal species. Eli straightened his posture, conscious of the 20 pairs of eyes, some with multiple pupils, others with compound structures, that had turned in his direction. "It's a knife, Professor. My family's knife." A sound like tinkling glass emanated from Zareth, the crystal equivalent of laughter. "A sacred knife, perhaps. Will you be performing rituals to appease the plasma storms?" More crystalline laughter followed, echoed by several of the non-human cadets who had brought molecular disruptors and quantum phase drills for the challenge ahead. "No, sir. Just a tool." Eli's voice remained steady despite the flush creeping up his neck. Professor Zareth's crystalline form shimmered as he moved closer, looming over the human cadet. The professor extended a prismatic appendage, and Eli reluctantly placed the knife in it. Zareth turned the blade in the purple light, faceted eyes analyzing every nick and imperfection. "Fascinating. Earth metals, carbon steel with trace elements, primitive forging techniques." The professor raised his voice to address the entire class. "Observe, cadets. This is what humans trusted their lives to before they joined the galactic community. A testament to their resourcefulness in the face of technological inadequacy." Laughter rippled through the gathering. Cadet Vrax, a silicon-based life form, extended his 4 upper limbs in a gesture of superiority as he activated his molecular restructuring array. The machine hummed to life, already analyzing the composition of the obsidian fields around them. "The challenge," Professor Zareth continued, returning the knife to Eli with obvious disdain, "is straightforward. You will each construct a shelter capable of withstanding Obsidian Prime's notorious plasma storms. You have 3 planetary cycles before the next storm system arrives. Your shelters must be constructed from the native materials, and they must protect you from winds exceeding 500 kilometers per hour and heat lightning capable of melting standard durasteel." The professor's crystal structure pulsed with light as he added, "Your performance in this trial accounts for 30% of your survival certification. Failure means repeating the entire second year. Begin." As the group dispersed, Eli caught the smirking expression of Cadet Syrah, whose gelatinous features rearranged themselves into an approximation of human mockery. Her tentacles were already manipulating a gravimetric stabilizer that could reshape the obsidian into whatever configuration she desired, at least in theory. Alone with his knife and standard-issue environmental suit, Eli took a deep breath of recycled air and began his methodical survey of the terrain, while the others immediately activated their machinery, creating a cacophony of whirring, drilling, and the occasional alarm shout when something didn't work as planned. Eli walked the perimeter of his assigned area with careful attention. The obsidian wasn't uniform. Eli noted variations in texture, subtle color shifts from deep black to a blue-tinged transparency in certain veins. He knelt, running gloved fingers along a natural fissure in the rock face of a small cliff. His instructors back on Earth had taught him that working with natural features rather than against them was the key to wilderness survival. Why should an alien wilderness be any different? Eli identified a promising spot where two obsidian formations created a natural corner. He examined the rock face carefully, tapping gently with the handle of his knife, listening for the subtle changes in sound that might indicate weakness or strength in the volcanic glass. After nearly an hour of examination, he began to work, inserting the blade into a hairline crack and applying careful, consistent pressure. A chip of obsidian broke free, then another. His progress was painstaking compared to the mechanical thunder emanating from his classmates' plots, but it was steady. By the end of the first cycle, while others were still calibrating their equipment to deal with the unexpectedly complex crystalline structure of Obsidian Prime's geology, Eli had created a small but promising hollow in the rock face. "Carter, what exactly are you doing?" The question came from Cadet Loren, a humanoid with iridescent skin, who had wandered over during a break from wrestling with her sonic excavator. The machine sat smoking slightly behind her, having overheated for the third time. "Working with the rock instead of against it," Eli answered, wiping sweat from his brow. The environmental suit was efficient, but still trapped heat during physical exertion. "These formations have natural stress points. If you find them, you can." He demonstrated by wedging his knife into a nearly invisible seam and applying pressure at precisely the right angle. A section of obsidian, the size of his torso, separated cleanly. Lauren's multifaceted eyes widened. "That's primitive but effective. My excavator keeps hitting molecular barriers in the glass structure. The manufacturer never tested it on volcanic formations with these specific properties. The old ways don't need software updates." Eli offered a small smile. "Want to try?" He extended the knife handle toward her. Lauren hesitated, glancing back at her expensive equipment, then toward the other cadets still struggling with various technological approaches. Finally, she reached for the knife. "Show me again where to look for these stress points." By the end of the second cycle, Eli's shelter had taken definitive shape, a cave-like structure that extended deep into the obsidian cliff. He had incorporated natural water channels to divert any moisture that might accumulate during the storm, and created subtle ventilation shafts that would allow air circulation without compromising the structure's integrity against the plasma winds. Across the testing grounds, the technological approaches were yielding mixed results. Some cadets had managed to create impressive structures using their equipment, while others faced mounting frustrations as the unique properties of Obsidian Prime's geology continued to confound their machinery. Cadet Vrax had programmed his molecular restructuring array to create a perfect dome, but the structure had already collapsed twice due to unexpected reactions between the manipulated obsidian molecules and the planet's unusual magnetic field. Each time, he had to start again, his forearms working frantically to recalibrate the increasingly unstable equipment. Syrah's gelatinous form had taken on a reddish tinge of frustration as her gravimetric stabilizer repeatedly failed to maintain the necessary field strength to shape the larger obsidian sections. Her tentacles wrapped around the machine in what appeared to be a strangling motion as she reset it for the 8th time. As the third cycle began, disaster struck in Lauren's sector. Her sonic excavator, pushed beyond its design parameters in an attempt to match the progress of Eli's manual approach, suffered a catastrophic power surge. The explosion sent shards of obsidian flying in all directions. Eli, who had been checking the integrity of his shelter ceiling, heard the blast and emerged to see Lauren trapped beneath a section of her partially completed structure. Without hesitation, he sprinted across the testing ground, heedless of the dangerous debris still raining down. "Stay still," he called to Lauren, whose iridescent skin had paled to a sickly, translucent state. A large obsidian shard had penetrated her environmental suit at the shoulder, and the unusual purple blood of her species was seeping around the wound. "The pressure seal!" she gasped, her respiratory orifices fluttering in distress. Eli worked quickly, using his knife to cut away the damaged section of the suit before applying the emergency sealant from his belt pouch. The temporary patch would maintain the suit's environmental integrity until proper medical attention could be provided. "Can you move your limbs?" he asked, carefully checking for additional injuries. Lauren's appendages moved tentatively. "Functional, but the pain is significant." "I'm taking you to my shelter," Eli decided, helping her to her feet. "It's nearly complete and structurally sound. We can wait out the storm there." As they made their slow progress toward Eli's excavation, they passed Vrax, who was frantically trying to stabilize his third attempt at a shelter. The silicon-based cadet spared them barely a glance. All four arms engaged in emergency repairs as his molecular restructuring array emitted an ominous whine. "You should power that down," Eli advised, pausing despite Lauren's weight against his side. "That sound indicates the molecular containment field is becoming unstable. Mind your own primitive methods, human," Vrax snapped, his rocky features contorted in concentration. "This is cutting-edge technology beyond your comprehension." Eli shrugged and continued toward his shelter, settling Lauren inside on a naturally formed ledge that he had smoothed into a serviceable bench. "Rest here. I need to finish the entrance barrier before the storm arrives." Lauren's multifaceted eyes studied the interior of Eli's shelter with obvious appreciation. "You created all this with just that knife?" "The knife just helped me work with what was already here," Eli explained, returning to the entrance where he had been crafting a sliding door from a large, flat section of obsidian. "The planet did most of the work over millennia. I just had to find the right spot and make some adjustments." A distant rumble interrupted their conversation. Eli stepped outside to see the horizon darkening, not with night, but with the approaching plasma storm. Violet-tinged clouds roiled against the sky, far closer than Professor Zareth had predicted. The storm had arrived early. "Everyone take cover immediately!" Eli shouted across the testing grounds, his voice barely audible over the rising wind. "The storm is accelerating!" His warning sent cadets scrambling toward their shelters, many of which were still woefully incomplete. Vrax's molecular restructuring array chose that moment to fail catastrophically, the containment field collapsing with a sound like shattering glass. The silicon-based cadet was thrown backward as his half-formed dome disintegrated. Syrah's tentacles worked frantically to stabilize her gravimetric field, but the approaching storm's electromagnetic interference was already causing critical fluctuations. Her shelter, an elegant spiral that showcased her species' aesthetic preferences, began to vibrate ominously. Eli rushed back inside his shelter and secured the obsidian door in place, fitting it into the grooves he had meticulously carved along the entrance. Through a small observation slit, he watched in horror as the first plasma tendrils touched down across the testing grounds, their violet energy sizzling against the black obsidian landscape. The storm's ferocity exceeded even the professor's dire warnings. Wind speeds surpassed 600 kilometers per hour, hurling loose equipment and debris like missiles. Heat lightning struck in rapid succession, leaving glowing pools of molten rock in its wake. The temperature outside climbed rapidly, and even within the shelter, Eli and Loren could feel the oppressive heat building. "The pressure will keep increasing," Eli explained, moving to a small channel he had created near the floor of the shelter. "That's why I built this." He twisted a section of obsidian that served as a primitive valve, opening a narrow tunnel that extended deep into the cliff face. Pressure equalization. Without it, the differential could cause structural failure. Lauren's eyes widened in understanding. The advanced shelters out there, they're sealed environments. If the pressure builds up around them, a distant crash confirmed her unfinished thought. Through the observation slit, they glimpsed Syrah's spiral shelter, collapsing under the combined assault of wind pressure and heat stress. The gelatinous cadet's form was briefly visible, flowing desperately toward the relative protection of a natural obsidian outcropping. "We need to help them after the storm passes," Lauren said, her iridescent skin pulsing with concern. Eli nodded grimly. "If our shelter holds." For the next 6 hours, they endured the full fury of Obsidian Prime's plasma storm. The obsidian walls of their shelter heated to uncomfortable levels, but remained structurally intact. Eli's pressure equalization system prevented the catastrophic compression that had claimed several of the technological shelters. The carefully placed ventilation channels provided enough circulation to prevent suffocation while being too narrow for the violent winds to penetrate. When the storm finally abated, leaving an eerie purple glow across the landscape, Eli cautiously slid open the obsidian door. The testing grounds had been transformed into a surreal tableau of destruction. Machinery lay scattered and broken, some half-melted by plasma strikes. Several of the advanced shelters had been completely destroyed, while others showed significant structural damage. "Help me look for survivors," Eli told Loren, who insisted on joining the search despite her injury. They found Vrax first, huddled in the partial remains of his third shelter attempt. The silicon-based cadet was physically unharmed, but clearly shaken. His rocky features set in an expression of disbelief as he surveyed the ruins of his molecular restructuring array. Syrah had survived by compressing her gelatinous form into a narrow crevice, though the experience had left her temporarily unable to maintain her humanoid shape. She flowed like a sentient puddle alongside Eli as they continued their search. One by one, they located the other cadets. Some had injuries requiring immediate medical attention, while others were merely exhausted and demoralized by the failure of their technological approaches. Eli led them all back to his shelter, which had space enough, if barely, to accommodate the entire class. As the survivors settled inside the obsidian cave, a familiar crystalline form appeared at the entrance. Professor Zareth stood silhouetted against the storm-tinted sky, his mineral body reflecting the purple aftermath glow. For a long moment, he observed the scene in silence, injured cadets being tended to, advanced technology in ruins, and at the center of it all, a human with nothing but a rust-flecked knife hanging from his belt. "Your shelter appears intact, Cadet Carter," the professor finally observed, his harmonic voice lacking its earlier mocking tone. "Yes, Professor. Would you like to inspect it?" Eli's offer contained no trace of smugness, only a cadet's appropriate deference to his instructor. Zareth entered, his crystalline form casting prismatic patterns across the obsidian walls as he moved through the space. He examined the pressure equalization system, the ventilation channels, the carefully contoured ceiling that had distributed the heat evenly to prevent stress fractures. "Elegant solutions," the professor admitted, running a crystalline appendage along a particularly smooth section of wall. "No power requirements, no calibration issues, no technological vulnerabilities." He turned to address the entire group. "A valuable lesson for all of you. The most advanced technology is worthless if it fails to account for the specific conditions it will encounter." The professor's faceted eyes fixed on Eli once more. "Full marks, Cadet Carter. Your approach will be documented for future training protocols." As Professor Zareth departed to arrange emergency extraction for the injured cadets, Vrax approached Eli, all four arms hanging in a posture of humility. "You're primitive," he stopped himself. "Your traditional method proved superior. Perhaps there is wisdom in your earth techniques that we have been too quick to dismiss. Sira, who had finally managed to reconstitute her humanoid form, extended a gelatinous tentacle in a gesture of respect. The technological path is not always the most efficient one, it seems. I would be interested in learning more about these stress points you mentioned. Eli smiled, patting the ancestral knife at his side. It's not about primitive versus advanced. It's about understanding your environment and using the right tool for the situation. Sometimes, that's a quantum phase drill. Sometimes, it's just a well-used knife and patience. In the days that followed, as the cadets were transported back to the Interplanetary Survey Academy's orbital station for debriefing and medical treatment, word of Eli's success spread rapidly through the institution. Professor Zareth, in an unprecedented move, requested that the human's ancestral knife be displayed in the Academy's Central Hall as a reminder of an essential principle. True mastery comes not from technological dependence, but from deep understanding and adaptability. Beneath the displayed knife, a simple plaque was installed, bearing words that would guide generations of future cadets. The power of experience and knowledge will outlast any tool. As for Eli, he returned to his studies with a quiet confidence that had not been there before. The rust-flecked knife of his ancestors had proven its worth among the stars, just as it had on the wilderness trails of Earth. Some traditions, it seemed, were worth preserving, even in an age of wonders. The violet skies of Obsidian Prime continued their celestial dance, indifferent to the brief visit of beings who had learned, through triumph and failure, that understanding would always be the most valuable technology of all. Cadet Eli Carter walked through the corridors of the Interplanetary Survey Academy, the memory of obsidian cliffs and plasma storms still fresh in his mind, despite the 3 months that had passed since the survival trial. His steps had a new confidence, a surety born from proving himself not just to his alien classmates, but to himself as well. Carter! The voice belonged to Academy Director Selenov, a towering figure whose reputation for stoicism was matched only by her brilliance in xenogeology. A moment of your time. Eli turned, standing at attention as the director approached. Yes, Director? Walk with me. It wasn't a request. As they moved through the station's curved corridors, Selenov continued. Your performance on Obsidian Prime has generated considerable interest among the faculty. Professor Zareth, in particular, has submitted an extensive analysis of your methodology. Eli remained silent, unsure if this was leading to commendation or criticism. The director's expression revealed nothing. The display of your ancestral tool has become something of a pilgrimage site for first-year cadets, Selenov remarked, her tone neutral. Some find it inspiring. Others consider it a challenge to their technological paradigms. I never intended to make a statement. Director, Eli ventured carefully. I simply used what I had available. Selenov stopped at a viewport that offered a panoramic view of the gas giant around which the Academy station orbited. Its swirling storms of amber and crimson created a hypnotic display against the void of space. Intention is irrelevant, cadet. Impact is what matters. And your impact has been... She paused, considering her words. Significant. The Academic Council has been re-evaluating our emphasis on technological solutions versus fundamental understanding of environments. She turned to face him directly. You've been selected for an advanced field research position. 3 other cadets will join you, including Cadet Loren, who specifically requested assignment to your team. Eli's surprise must have shown on his face, because the director's stern features softened fractionally. Her report on your actions during the storm was quite detailed. She credits you with saving her life and demonstrating exceptional leadership qualities during the crisis. I only did what anyone would have done, Eli replied. No, Selenov corrected him. You did what someone with proper training and the right instincts would have done. Those qualities are rarer than you might think, even among our diverse student body. She handed him a data crystal. Your assignment details. You leave in 2 standard weeks for the Centauri Reach. The indigenous populations there have refused modern technological assistance, yet maintain thriving settlements in extreme conditions. Your team will study their adaptation techniques and assess their potential applications for survey protocols. Eli accepted the crystal, its weight in his palm somehow reminiscent of his knife's handle. Thank you for this opportunity, Director. Don't thank me yet, Carter. The Centauri natives are notoriously suspicious of outsiders. Your team was selected because your Obsidian Prime approach suggests you might earn their trust where our previous technology-focused teams failed. Her gaze was penetrating. Don't disappoint me. As the director departed, Eli remained at the viewport, contemplating this unexpected turn in his academic journey. From being mocked for his primitive tool to leading a specialized research team, all because he had trusted the wisdom passed down through generations of his family. That evening, Eli sought out the central hall where his knife was displayed. The ancestral blade rested on a cushion of synthetic velvet, illuminated by subtle lighting that highlighted every nick and imperfection in its well-used surface. A small group of cadets from various species stood before it, engaged in animated discussion. But the molecular efficiency is nowhere near what a standard cutter provides, argued an avian cadet, his feathers ruffling with emphasis. Efficiency isn't everything, countered his companion, a methane breather, whose environmental suit hummed softly with each respiration cycle. The knife doesn't require power cells, calibration, or software updates. Its reliability factor in diverse conditions is nearly perfect. It's not about the knife itself, Eli interjected, stepping forward. The cadets turned, startled by the presence of the now famous Earth cadet. It's about understanding principles that transcend specific tools. My ancestors didn't use this knife because they lacked better technology. They used it because they understood exactly how it would behave in any situation. The avian cadet's head tilted in the gesture his species used to indicate respectful consideration. You're saying the knowledge behind the tool matters more than the tool itself. Exactly. The most advanced quantum phase drill is useless if you don't understand the material you're cutting. But with enough knowledge, even the simplest tool can accomplish what seems impossible. As the cadets dispersed, continuing their debate in hushed tones, Eli found himself alone with the displayed knife. He reached out, stopping just short of touching the protective field that surrounded it. Quite the philosopher you've become, came a familiar crystalline voice. Eli turned to find Professor Zareth standing nearby, his mineral body catching the hall's lights in kaleidoscopic patterns. Professor, I was just visiting your famous blade, Zareth finished for him. Understandable, though I suspect you miss having it at your side. The Academy regulations only permit standard equipment during normal operations, Eli replied with a shrug. Rules are rules. The crystal professor made a sound like wind chimes, his species equivalent of a thoughtful hum. Rules, like tools, serve specific purposes. Sometimes they require adaptation. From a compartment in his crystalline form, Zareth produced a familiar object, Eli's knife, no longer behind the display field, but tangible and real. Professor, I don't understand. The display contains a perfect replica, Zareth explained. The Academic Council approved my request to return the original to you for your Centauri assignment. The indigenous population there places great value on objects with history and lineage. Your knife has both. Eli accepted the blade with reverence, its weight familiar and reassuring in his hand. Thank you, Professor. This means more than I can express. Consider it acknowledgement of a lesson well taught. Cadet Carter. Zareth's faceted eyes caught the light in a way that suggested sincerity. In my 3 centuries of teaching, I have rarely been so thoroughly educated by a student. As the professor departed, his crystalline form glinting under the corridor lights, Eli secured the knife once more at his belt. The simple act felt like coming home, like completing a circuit that connected him to generations of his family who had faced unknown wilderness with this same companion at their side. The next 2 weeks passed in a flurry of preparation. Eli immersed himself in studying what little was known about the Centauri natives, a humanoid species with remarkable adaptations to their planet's harsh radiation levels and atmospheric peculiarities. Previous survey teams had approached them with medical technology, agricultural enhancements, and communication systems, all of which had been firmly rejected. Lauren joined him in the research, her iridescent skin now fully healed, but bearing a subtle pattern where the obsidian shard had penetrated her shoulder. "They remind me of you," she observed one evening, gesturing toward holographic images of the Centauri dwellings, structures that seemed to grow organically from the planet's unusual crystalline forests. "How so?" Eli asked, looking up from a cultural analysis report. "They don't reject technology because they don't understand it. They reject it because they understand something else better." She pointed to a particularly complex dwelling that spiraled upward through the canopy of crystal trees. "Look at the structural integrity there. No support beams, no anti-gravity fields. Yet it reaches heights that defy conventional engineering principles." Eli nodded thoughtfully. "They're working with their environment, not against it. Just like on Obsidian Prime." "Exactly. Which is why you're perfect for this assignment." Lauren's multifaceted eyes gleamed with anticipation. "I've been studying your approach. I want to understand how you see the world." "It's not complicated," Eli said with a slight smile. "My great-grandfather taught my grandfather, who taught my father, who taught me. Look twice, cut once. Understand before you act. Listen to what the environment is telling you. Simple principles, profound results," Lauren mused. "Perhaps that's what we've been missing in our interactions with the Centauri." The final team was completed by the addition of Cadets Vrax and Sira, both of whom had approached Eli after the Obsidian Prime incident with newfound respect and genuine interest in his methodologies. Vrax had even gone so far as to temporarily abandon his molecular restructuring studies in favor of hands-on material interaction courses, a dramatic shift for a silicon-based life form who had once defined himself by his technological prowess. Sira, meanwhile, had developed a fascinating hybrid approach, using her species' natural morphological abilities in conjunction with minimal technology to achieve results that pure machinery could not. Her final project, a living structure that responded to environmental changes without powered sensors, had earned the highest marks in architectural adaptation studies. On the day of departure, Director Selenov personally saw them off at the transport bay. "Remember," she told them as they prepared to board, "you're not there to change them. You're there to understand them. The survey's mission is knowledge, not conversion." "Yes, Director," Eli responded for the team. "We understand completely." Selenov's stern expression softened momentarily. "I believe you do, Carter. That's why you're leading this team." She stepped back as the transport doors began to close. "Make the Academy proud." The journey to the Centauri system took 17 days in hyperspace, during which the team finalized their approach strategy and continued studying the limited information available on their destination. Eli spent hours each day practicing with his knife, not combat techniques, but the subtle skills of reading materials, finding stress points, and working with natural formations rather than imposing artificial structures. Vrax, whose silicon biology gave him natural affinity for mineral compositions, proved an eager student. "The crystalline formations on Centauri Prime share certain properties with my own cellular structure," he explained, his 4 arms gesturing enthusiastically. "I should be able to sense vibrational patterns that might indicate structural weaknesses or strengths. That could be invaluable, Eli agreed, especially if we need to construct our own shelters, rather than imposing on their hospitality. Sira had been studying the atmospheric conditions. The radiation levels will require additional protection for you carbon-based team members, she noted, her gelatinous form rippling with concern. I've been working on a natural compound derived from my own cellular material that might provide temporary shielding without technological signatures. Lauren, whose species evolved on a high-radiation world, would need less protection, but she had been focusing on communication strategies. The Centauri language includes subtle bioluminescent displays, she demonstrated, by causing patterns of light to pulse across her iridescent skin. I've been practicing their basic greeting sequences. As the transport emerged from hyperspace in the Centauri system, Eli felt a familiar sensation, the same mixture of anticipation and respect he had experienced before every wilderness expedition with his father back on Earth. The unknown lay before them, not as something to be conquered, but as something to be understood. Centauri Prime grew larger in the viewports as they approached, a world of startling beauty, its surface a tapestry of crystalline forests that caught and refracted the light of its sun in rainbow patterns visible even from orbit. Unlike the harsh obsidian landscapes of their survival trial, this environment seemed almost magical in its luminescent splendor. Their landing zone had been selected carefully, close enough to observe one of the larger Centauri settlements, but far enough away to avoid seeming intrusive. As the transport touched down in a small clearing, the team gathered their minimal equipment, each member carrying only what they could personally manage, a deliberate departure from previous missions, heavy machinery, and elaborate base camps. Remember, Eli reminded them as the transport doors opened to reveal their first direct view of the crystalline forest. We observe first. We listen. We learn. Only then do we interact. The air that greeted them carried an odd sweetness, like honey with metallic undertones. The crystal trees rose around their clearing like transparent giants, their structures creating natural prism effects that cast dancing rainbows across the forest floor. Within these structures, Eli could see what appeared to be habitations, not separate from the trees, but somehow grown within them, organic and technological at once. Incredible, breathed Vrax, all four arms extended in sensory appreciation. The vibration patterns, they're harmonizing with the crystalline molecular structure. It's like the trees and dwellings are engaged in constant communication. Sira flowed across the ground, her gelatinous form absorbing and reflecting the prismatic light. The soil composition contains trace elements I've never encountered before. They seem to be creating natural energy pathways between the crystal formations. Lauren's skin had begun to pulse subtly, responding instinctively to the bioluminescent patterns visible within the nearest crystal trees. There's communication happening all around us. The light patterns, they're like a constant background conversation. Eli knelt, placing his hand flat against the ground, feeling the subtle vibrations of this living world. His knife hung at his side, not needed yet, but a reassuring presence nonetheless. We'll set up camp here, he decided. Minimal impact. We observe for at least 3 days before attempting contact. As they established their simple base, nothing more than sleeping quarters and basic analysis equipment, movement caught Eli's attention at the forest's edge. A figure stood watching them, almost invisible due to skin that seemed to mimic the crystal tree's transparency. Only subtle shifts in light refraction revealed its presence. Eli straightened slowly, making no sudden movements. He could sense his teammates freezing in place as they, too, noticed their observer. "What do we do?" Vrax whispered, his rocky voice uncharacteristically uncertain. "Nothing," Eli replied softly. "We're the visitors here. We wait for an invitation." The figure observed them for several more minutes, then melted back into the crystal forest without a sound. No hostile action. No greeting. Just evaluation. Precisely what Eli's team had come to do themselves. They know we're here, Lauren said unnecessarily. Yes, Eli agreed. And they'll be watching how we behave when we think no one is looking. So we continue exactly as planned, with respect and patience. The next 3 days established a rhythm. The team would emerge from their shelters at dawn, spend the day making careful observations of the environment and distant settlement, catalog their findings during the evening, and retire after sunset. They took nothing from the forest except recordings and measurements. They left nothing behind except footprints, which the peculiar soil seemed to heal within hours anyway. Throughout this time, they occasionally glimpsed Centauri natives observing them from the crystal tree line. The watchers never approached, but never tried to hide their presence either. It seemed to be an open acknowledgement. We see you seeing us. On the fourth morning, as Eli emerged from his shelter, he found something placed precisely at the center of their camp, an object that had definitely not been there when they retired the previous night. It resembled a knife, but its blade was formed from a single crystal, somehow both translucent and iridescent in the morning light. The handle was crafted from what appeared to be the same material as the crystal trees, but shaped to fit a humanoid grip. Eli's teammates gathered around, staring at the object in wonder and confusion. Is it a threat? Vrax wondered, his silicon form tense with uncertainty. A gift? Suggested Syrah, flowing around the object without touching it. Lauren's skin pulsed with excitement. It's an invitation. Look, the blade's refraction pattern matches the central settlement's largest structure. They're inviting us there. Eli knelt beside the crystal knife, noting its craftsmanship, not machine perfect but organic, revealing the hand and intent of its maker. He reached slowly for his own ancestral blade, drawing it from its sheath with deliberate movements. He placed it on the ground beside the crystal offering, creating a deliberate parallel between the two implements. Now we wait, he said, settling cross-legged before the paired knives. The team followed his example, arranging themselves in a circle around the objects. They did not speak, did not consult their equipment, simply waited with the patience that Eli had been cultivating in them since their assignment began. An hour passed before movement at the forest's edge announced the arrival of 3 Centauri natives. They emerged from the crystal trees like solidifying light, their bodies translucent yet clearly defined, internal structures visible as shifting patterns of luminescence. They wore no clothing, but were adorned with what appeared to be carefully shaped crystal fragments that caught and directed light in specific patterns across their forms. The leader, distinguished by more elaborate crystal adornments, approached the circle, steps deliberate and measured. Without hesitation, the Centauri reached down and lifted Eli's knife, examining it with evident curiosity. Light patterns rippled across the native's translucent form, communication happening on a level the team could observe, but not yet comprehend. Eli, taking his cue from the Centauri's actions, carefully lifted the crystal knife he had been offered. Its weight was surprising, lighter than it appeared, balanced with precision that spoke of deep craftsmanship. The Centauri leader's internal light patterns shifted to a blue-green hue. A sound emerged, not from what might be considered a mouth, but seemingly from the entire crystalline form. You understand value of handmade, not machine perfect, hand perfect. The words were heavily accented, but unmistakably in Standard Galactic, the lingua franca of the known systems. Previous reports had mentioned nothing of the Centauri's linguistic capabilities. Eli responded carefully. Each tool tells the story of its maker and its users. This knife, he gestured to his ancestral blade, has been in my family for generations. It carries our history. The Centauri's light patterns intensified. Yes, history and object, memory and material. Your academy others brought dead things. Machines with no memory, no history. useless to Centauri. Understanding dawned across the team simultaneously. The previous missions had offered technology that, while advanced, carried no cultural significance, no history, no connection to its creators, to a species that apparently valued the embodied memory of objects. Such offerings would indeed seem hollow. Eli held up the crystal knife. This carries your history. Carries Maker's light pattern. Carries Crystal's growth song. Will carry meeting memory between your kind and mine. The Centauri gestured toward the settlement, visible through the crystal trees. Come, bring histories, share knowledge. As the team gathered their minimal equipment, Eli felt a profound sense of rightness. Director Selenov's instinct had been correct. They had been selected not because of technological prowess, but because of their demonstrated ability to understand and respect different approaches to the same challenges. The Centauri settlement, when they reached it, revealed itself as a marvel of organic engineering. The crystal trees had been guided rather than cut. Their growth patterns encouraged along specific paths to create dwellings that were simultaneously living parts of the forest and functional spaces for their inhabitants. Light cascaded through the structures, creating not just illumination, but information. The constant communication Lauren had detected in the bioluminescent patterns. The center of the settlement featured a massive crystal spire that rose nearly 100 meters into the sky, its facets catching and redistributing the sunlight throughout the community in what Vrax's sensors identified as nearly perfect energy distribution without conversion loss. Inside the central spire, the team was introduced to the Centauri Council, 7 elders whose translucent forms contained more elaborate and complex light patterns than the younger members of their species. The council chamber was a marvel of acoustics and light manipulation, with every surface precisely angled to enhance communication through both sound and luminescence. Many cycles. Your academy sends machines and dead tools. The lead elder's light patterns conveyed both language and emotion simultaneously. We see no wisdom in these offerings, no understanding, but you, the elder's gaze fixed on Eli. You bring ancient tool with living memory. You wait, you watch, you listen to our world before speaking. This is wisdom, academy others did not show. Eli bowed slightly, a gesture of respect that transcended species boundaries. We came to learn, not to change. Your world, your ways, they have much to teach us. And perhaps we have things to learn from you as well. The elder acknowledged, internal lights shifting to a contemplative purple hue. Not from your machines, but from your understanding. Your knife memory shows this understanding. For the next 14 days, the team was granted unprecedented access to Centauri knowledge and practices. They discovered that the crystal trees were not merely habitations, but also natural computational systems, storing and processing information through light patterns in ways that rivaled the most advanced quantum computers without requiring external power sources. The Centauri demonstrated how they had adapted to their high radiation environment not by creating artificial barriers, but by incorporating radiation-absorbing elements into their diet and living spaces, transforming what would be harmful into a resource. Their architecture used natural principles to create structures that would require advanced force fields and anti-gravity systems if attempted with conventional technology. In return, the team shared their own knowledge, not by offering technology, but by demonstrating principles. Vrax showed how his silicon biology responded to different mineral compositions, giving the Centauri new insights into potential adaptations for their crystal structures. Syrah demonstrated her species' morphological adaptability, which fascinated the Centauri, whose forms were more fixed despite their translucence. Lauren, whose iridescent skin could approximate some of the Centauri's bioluminescent communication, became particularly adept at cultural exchange, learning subtleties of light pattern language that had eluded previous researchers entirely. Eli found himself spending hours with the Centauri craftspeople, learning their techniques for working with the living crystal without damaging its internal structure. His knife became a point of connection, a tangible representation of principles that transcended species boundaries: respect for materials, understanding of natural properties, patience in application. On their final evening before departure, the Centauri Council presented each team member with a crystal tool adapted to their specific biology and purpose. Vrax received a resonating rod that could detect molecular stress in silicon-based structures. Syrah was given a luminescent sphere that responded to morphological changes, enhancing her natural shape-shifting abilities. Lauren accepted a set of crystal filters that, when placed over her multifaceted eyes, allowed her to perceive light patterns previously invisible to her species. For Eli, there was the crystal knife he had been offered on that first morning, but now transformed. The Centauri had incorporated a small fragment of his ancestral blade into the crystalline structure, creating a hybrid tool that carried both histories, both traditions. Two wisdoms, one understanding, the elder explained, as Eli accepted the gift with profound gratitude. When you return to your academy, show them that true knowledge comes not from imposing, but from blending. As the transport lifted off the following day, carrying the team back toward the academy with their unprecedented wealth of cultural and scientific data, Eli stood at the viewport, watching the crystalline forests recede beneath them. The hybrid knife hung at his belt, a constant reminder of the mission's success and the principles that had made it possible. "You know," Lauren said, joining him at the viewport, "when Professor Zareth laughed at your knife back on Obsidian Prime, I don't think any of us could have imagined where that moment would lead." Eli smiled, his hand resting on the knife's handle, part earth steel, part Centauri crystal, wholly symbolic of the understanding they had achieved. Sometimes, the smallest tools create the largest openings. The transport entered hyperspace, carrying them back toward an academy that would never view primitive technologies quite the same way again. In his report, already taking shape in his mind, Eli knew he would emphasize not the technological marvels they had witnessed, but the philosophy behind them: understanding before action, respect before innovation, patience before progress. These were the true tools of exploration, more valuable than any blade, more powerful than any machine, more lasting than any shelter carved from stone. And they had been with humanity all along, passed down through generations like an ancestral knife, waiting only for the wisdom to recognize their worth among the stars. The lessons of Obsidian Prime had opened a door. The wisdom of Centauri Prime had shown what lay beyond it. And Cadet Eli Carter, once mocked for his reliance on an ancient tool, had become the bridge between worlds that neither technology nor tradition alone could have connected. As hyperspace enveloped the transport in its dimensional embrace, Eli thought of his great-grandfather, who could never have imagined that his simple steel knife would one day touch the stars, not as a relic of the past, but as a key to humanity's future among the cosmos. "Look twice, cut once," he whispered to himself, the ancient adage taking on new meaning in the vastness of space. Understand before you act. Listen to what the universe is telling you. Simple wisdom, profound results. The journey had only just begun.